Chicago.
You were born in Chicago.
Yeah. Where in Chicago?
Yeah.
St. Anne's Hospital.
Please.
Because I was born on December 22nd.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, people did not leave their Christmas lights up. They would put them up for Christmas and then take them down at New Year's, you know. So my mom made my dad drive her around, and they kept you in the hospital for like a week when you had a baby. So she knew the lights would be gone by the time she got out of the hospital. So she made my dad drive the two of them around and look at Christmas lights, and I was almost born in the car because of that.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's where I got my first in vitro conversation about color, because I imagined her telling my dad how pretty the Christmas lights were and so on. So, born 3 days later, I would have been named Noel instead of Neil. And they just call me Noel.
Hey, you're actually one of those Noel-it-alls, huh?
Yeah, Noel. God. We lived in the north end, north side of Chicago, and I moved here when I was 4 and a half, or like 4 years old.
So tell me, how did you first get started into art? What was your first remembrance of that?
Now that's a good one. My first canvas was a wall, a freshly painted wall that my father had done. And I took it to mean that he had done it for me. So apparently my first subject matter was a burning house. I must have seen it someplace. And my mother was thrilled because it was such a nice drawing of a burning house. My dad, on the other hand, was not so thrilled because he had just freshly painted the wall.
Oh, man.
So forever after, I made him prime my canvases for me. Oh, that's a lie. But that's how I discovered that, or how other people discovered that I had an art ability, I guess. So it started very young.
Okay.
And it got me out of a lot of schoolwork because I was the kid that always got to decorate the room. And I never had to do the regular classroom stuff.
So the teachers obviously encouraged you.
Right, yeah. And you know, Catholic schools were like that anyway. They believed in a well-rounded education. And if they got a kid who had art ability, you know, then, you know, that was fine with me because I liked doing it and I didn't like doing the lessons. So.
So in high school, when you moved on to high school, what happened?
Well, I was lucky. I went to Central Catholic, and they had what is hardly ever seen anymore, is that's a 4-year art major degree. So I got 4 years of art, and by the time I got to college, I knew all that basic stuff anyway. It was a very good program. They had a teacher named Sister Mary Genevieve, and I don't know if I've ever told you this story, Matt. When I used to do art restoration, I had some people one day call me. They wanted me to touch up a painting that they had of their little boy sitting in a chair with a dachshund puppy. And when I cleaned the painting, got all the grime off of it, in the lower right-hand corner was the signature S.M. Genevieve. And my high school art teacher had done that painting, you know, years before.
Wow.
So it was kind of a neat thing to find that out.
Yeah, nice.
She was a very good artist, actually. She had a show at the Toledo Museum, and I did also later when I was in college. They used to have a thing called Gallery, I think it was called Gallery One, and they would have shows for local artists, solo shows for local artists. And I had my first solo exhibition at the Toledo Museum of Art when I was like in my well, I guess I would have been early 20s. So,
Did you ever teach at the museum?
yeah, oh yeah.
What year was that, do you think?
Oh, I taught from 78 to, for about 8 years I taught, mainly part-time, but 1 year of full-time. And they've called me a couple times since then to come over and teach. I met a guy in graduate school, a friend of mine from, Hiram College. And his name was Fritz Dreisbach. And we were friends in grad school. He was a painter. And then he took a ceramic class and he attended a glass workshop that was taught by Harvey Littleton, who I have already mentioned. And Fritz ended up becoming Harvey's first graduate teaching assistant or lab assistant at Wisconsin, and my first job out of graduate school was Harvey's administrative assistant. When I was looking for teaching jobs, I had turned down a lot of, well, not a lot, I think 3 jobs, because they also wanted me to teach art history, because I had had so much art history, and I didn't want to teach art history. So I left Iowa City, where I did my grad work, and came back to Ohio, and I was back here 3 days, and I got a call from University of Wisconsin saying, was I interested in this job as an administrative assistant? And it was a pretty decent job. I had a couple of secretaries to work for me, and I had a 4-day week, and they gave me a free studio and
Oh, nice.
you know, and I thought, well, I'd work it into a teaching job at Wisconsin. Well, that never happened, but the first day I showed up, I was supposed to be representing the art department, so I had to wear a suit and tie, which is the first time that I'd really ever had to wear a suit and tie. So I'm in the art department with a 3-piece, really a nice looking 3-piece black suit and tie on, and my friend Fritz Dreisbach shows up. And he didn't know I was there, and I didn't know he was there, but he fell on the floor laughing. He thought it was so funny to see me dressed up like that. Because I had to go to all sorts of social functions with my boss, Harvey Littleton, so he could tell people that this was his personal assistant.
So a while back, I did a lot of reproductions for you. What do? We scanned film and we did some photographs of yours and organized all your pieces. Yeah. And then you were just so kind enough to give me a piece for doing that work. And I happen to have this piece right here. It's a real fine piece.
How convenient.
Isn't that nice? It's called River Clearing Side Cut. It's a very nice piece, very colorful. And can you give me some insight on this piece?
Yeah, can I see it so I can remember
Sure.
it? This is oil pastel, and I used to work a lot with oil pastel. Side Cut is a place called Side Cut Park, which is on the river near where I paint. These are done on location. I'm what they call a plein air painter, and something this size I could do in a couple hours, and then usually I'll look at them when I get them home and sometimes rework them, sometimes do additional stuff, sometimes scrape back through them and so on. I don't work too large outside. Sometimes I turn them into bigger pieces in the studio, but I prefer to sit when I work, and oftentimes I'll work on 2 or 3 at the same time. You know, I'll get them to a point and then just kind of sit them down and look at them, start another one, and come back. And it's rare for me to take a piece and finish it and mat it and frame it and exhibit it without tinkering with it. you know.
Mm-hmm.
I like to let them work on me. And I hate to admit it, but the best way for me to do that is to put them in front of the television set. And then I find that I'm not looking at TV, but I'm looking at my paintings.
Interesting.
So that's one of my working techniques. So, and there's nothing particularly special about this one. The nice thing about painting in the same location is that it changes from day to day. Like I say, I've worked there over 20 years, and people say, well, how can you keep doing the same subject matter? But it's different every day. The light is different. The seasons change. It's neat to see. One year, I went out on March 15th, and the leaves hadn't even opened up yet, but it was 80 degrees. And I sat and painted for 4 hours, and I actually watched the leaves open up in front of my eyes. So, and this is a very popular spot for fishermen. There's always fishermen in the river, and deer will come up and graze within 6, 7, 8 feet of me, and I leave them alone, and they leave me alone. So, anyway, that's kind of the story. I've done hundreds and hundreds of little paintings this size. So.
Yes, this is a fine piece, and Becky and I, enjoy it so much that we have a nice spot over there for it in our bistro here.
Thank you. Well, I was happy to give it to you. You've done a lot of work for me, and you know, you've been a good friend for many, many years.
Thank you.
It used to be oil pastel, but I've worked with soft pastel. I used to paint a lot with gouache, which for those of you that don't know, it's an opaque form of watercolor. Mm-hmm. It actually, the word means in the French manner, as opposed to British watercolor, which is more transparent in nature. I was going to say, because I teach so many varieties of drawing and painting medium that I've worked in a lot of them.
So you work in most mediums?
Yeah, when I'm outside, I find that I'm restricted with oil paint because things stick to it easily, airborne stuff, bugs, grass, so on. So I don't usually work with oil paint, but I work with oil pastels, which are basically a big crayon, big expensive crayon. And when you work outside with them, just being outside heats them up enough, and rather than thin them with turpentine or linseed oil, I move them around with my fingers. I actually push them around with my fingers and sometimes scrape through them and so on. So they're a nice medium to use. And acrylics I don't use outside because they dry way too quickly. By the time you get them on your palette in the outdoors, the paint is dry.
So tell me, Neil, can you expand on your teaching experience for me?
Sure. After I spent 2 years doing administrative work at the University of Wisconsin, I got a full-time job teaching at Western Kentucky University, where I was head of the painting area down there. And I really enjoyed Western Kentucky in terms, especially after having spent 2 winters in Wisconsin. Western Kentucky is down about an hour north of Nashville, and I enjoyed that. And that's when I really got into landscape painting, because I liked the way the roads cut through the hills down there. A lot of people didn't like it. They thought it spoiled the landscape, and to me it just made them more interesting. So I really started getting into painting on location and painting landscapes when I had done a little bit in graduate school, but mainly I really got into it in Kentucky. And I spent 3 years in Kentucky, and then I wanted to get a little bit closer to home, so I took a job at the University of Akron, which is near where my wife was born. So, and I spent 8 years there. And then, then you don't want to know why I left there. I decided I was sick of the Midwest, so, and I got divorced and got remarried, and my new wife and I moved to California. I had friends out there and relatives out there, so I moved out to Southern California and lived in Long Beach for a year. And all the time I was out there, I was hunting for a full-time teaching position, and one finally came up at Fresno City College in Fresno, California, which didn't turn out, it actually was a temporary job. Some guy was on medical leave, and I wasn't that thrilled with the San Joaquin Valley. It gets up to 113 degrees there in the summertime, and winter is 3 months of fog.
Oh my.
So when my period was up there, they offered me part-time work to continue on, but I missed my son, and my mom was getting older, so I moved back to Ohio. And that's when I went to Toledo and started teaching at the Toledo Museum of Art. Mm. So all of this is a little bit out of sequence, but now for the past 20-some years, I've been teaching for Monroe County Community College on a part-time basis, and I've developed a lot of interesting students who otherwise wouldn't get the quality of education that they get because I'm a really good teacher.
What is your most favorite piece that you've ever painted?
Well, I've done hundreds and hundreds of paintings, and I don't know if it's my favorite, but the painting that's most dear to me is a memorial portrait I did years ago in graduate school of my dad sitting in a chair in which he had a heart attack and died. Oh, and what makes it interesting was that philosophers and aestheticians speak sometimes about something called the aesthetic experience, which means that you do something where you're so totally involved that you're almost in an unconscious state when you do it. So I did this painting from a photograph of my dad, and I think I worked on it for maybe an hour and a half, and then I was going to go home and eat, get something to eat and come back to my studio in the evening and finish it up. I did that, and when I came back, I looked at it, and I realized it didn't need anything. It was complete. So I rarely showed the painting, only a couple times. The times I did show it, it won a couple of awards. And I had a relationship with a poet in Detroit, and I had the painting stored in my basement. And it was the dampness down there wasn't doing it any good. So I took it to this lady's, she has a really nice mid-century modern condo in Detroit. And I said, why don't you put this on your wall, because it deserves to be seen. And she did that for a number of years and had it. And then she won a poetry grant herself called the Kresge Grant. And she offered to buy the painting from me, and I said, no, it's just too personal, and I promised it to my daughter when I died. So she said, well, how about, I won't mention the amount of money, but she paid me a pretty good sum for it, and she said, how about if I leave it to your daughter when I die? I'll put it in my will that when I pass away, she gets the painting.
That's so nice.
So in the meantime, I had a digital print made of it on a much smaller scale. The painting was vertical, 3 feet wide and 5 feet high. So it's a pretty good sized painting. And I made my daughter a digital print to hang in her house. So I ended up satisfying 2 women at the same time.
That's amazing.
Which is pretty rare.
That is pretty rare.
It's rare enough to satisfy one.
I will try. Thank you, Neil, for coming to Photographic Solutions and sitting in our bistro and talking about your art and some of your life experiences. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Matt. It was my pleasure.